The evening air hung heavy over the James River, the lingering heat of the day trapped between the water and the darkening sky. Sarah Miller clutched her worn cotton shawl tighter around her shoulders as she hurried along the cobblestone streets of Richmond. At 26, she had spent her entire life in bondage at Whitefield Plantation, until 3 months ago when her master had loaned her to Dr. Nathaniel Blackwood, a prominent physician whose reputation stretched across Virginia. "He's expanding his medical research," Master Whitefield had told the overseer when Sarah was selected. "Says he needs strong specimens." And the word specimens had lingered in Sarah's mind ever since. Dr. Blackwood's 3-story brick home stood at the edge of Richmond's most affluent neighborhood, its windows glowing amber against the twilight. Behind the main house sat a separate building, smaller with fewer windows, all of them covered with thick cloth from the inside. The locals called it the healing house, though Sarah had yet to see anyone emerge from it healed. "Girl, stop dawdling!" Mrs. Blackwood's sharp voice cut through Sarah's thoughts. The doctor's wife stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the warm light from within. "The guests will be arriving within the hour, and the doctor needs you downstairs." Sarah quickened her pace, careful not to spill the bucket of water she carried. "Yes, ma'am, I'm coming." Dr. Blackwood's dinner parties were becoming more frequent. Distinguished gentlemen from across Virginia, doctors, professors, wealthy plantation owners, gathered to discuss what they called medical advancements. Sarah and the other enslaved workers were forbidden from listening to these conversations, but whispers traveled through the slave quarters like wind through tall grass. The basement of the main house connected to the healing house through a narrow underground passage. Sarah had been there only once, when first brought to the property. The memory of what she'd glimpsed, steel tables, glass jars containing things she couldn't identify, the sharp smell of chemicals, still visited her in nightmares. As she entered the kitchen, she found Isaiah, a man in his 40s who had been with the Blackwoods for nearly a decade, arranging glasses on a silver tray. "He's in a mood tonight," Isaiah murmured, not looking up. "3 of them failed this week." Sarah set down her bucket. "3 what?" Isaiah glanced toward the door to ensure they were alone. "Procedures. Doctor says they weren't strong enough. Blamed it on poor stock." He finally met Sarah's eyes. One of them was Eli. Sarah's heart constricted. Eli had arrived with her from Whitefield Plantation, a kind man with gentle hands who had taught her to read in secret, sharing precious scraps of newspaper and Bible pages when the overseers weren't watching. "What happened to him?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Same as the others," Isaiah replied, "buried behind the healing house." He turned away, effectively ending the conversation as Mrs. Blackwood entered the kitchen. "Sarah, the doctor wants you in his study. Now." Mrs. Blackwood's tone left no room for hesitation. Dr. Blackwood's study was a sanctuary of wealth and education, walls lined with leather-bound books, anatomical drawings, and certificates from medical schools in Philadelphia and London. The doctor himself sat behind a large mahogany desk, writing in a leather journal. At 45, Nathaniel Blackwood was considered handsome by Richmond society, with his neatly trimmed beard and intelligent eyes. Those eyes now looked up as Sarah entered. "Ah, the Whitefield girl." He closed his journal. "How are you adjusting to life in my household?" The question surprised her. Doctor Blackwood rarely addressed the enslaved people directly unless giving orders. "Fine, sir," she answered cautiously. "Good, good." He stood, walking around the desk. "Your master speaks highly of your intelligence. Says you rarely needed physical correction at Whitefield. Is that true?" "I try to do my duties proper, sir." Dr. Blackwood nodded, studying her face. "I have important guests coming tonight, men of science and progress. I'll need you to assist in serving, but more importantly, I need you to observe." Sarah remained still, uncertain what he meant. "You'll be in the dining room throughout the evening. Listen to our discussions. Remember what questions are asked, what concerns are raised." He leaned against his desk. You won't understand most of it, of course, but I need to know their reactions, particularly Dr. Hammond's. He's skeptical of my research." "Yes, sir," Sarah replied, though confusion clouded her mind. Why would he want her to listen when the enslaved were usually prohibited from hearing such conversations? "You're wondering why I'm asking this of you, Doctor?" Blackwood smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Let's say I'm conducting a different kind of experiment tonight, one that requires a pair of unobtrusive eyes and ears." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Blackwood entered, her silk dress rustling with each step. "The first carriage has arrived, Nathaniel." "Excellent." The doctor straightened his waistcoat. "Remember, girl, observe and remember. We'll speak again after the guests depart." The dining room glowed with candlelight, illuminating the fine china and crystal glasses arranged on the white tablecloth. 8 men sat around the table, with Dr. Blackwood at its head. Sarah moved quietly around the periphery, filling wine glasses and serving dishes prepared by the cook. "Gentlemen," Dr. Blackwood addressed his guests once the main course had been served, "I've invited you here not merely for dinner, but for an opportunity that comes perhaps once in a generation, the chance to advance medical science beyond its current boundaries." Sarah kept her eyes downcast as she moved behind Dr. Hammond, a grey-haired physician who had travelled from Charlottesville. She noticed his fingers tightening around his fork. "You speak of advancing science," Dr. Hammond said, "yet your methods remain shrouded in secrecy. 3 months of vague promises, Blackwood, and still no published findings." Dr. Blackwood smiled patiently. "Science requires precision, as you well know. Premature publication would be irresponsible." "What exactly is the nature of your research?" asked another guest, a younger doctor whose name Sarah hadn't caught. "You've hinted at treatments for ailments previously thought incurable." "Indeed." Dr. Blackwood set down his wine glass. "My focus is the nervous system, specifically how it responds to various stimuli under different conditions. The implications for treating everything from epilepsy to melancholia are profound." Dr. Hammond frowned. "And your test subjects? I presume they're Negro?" "Of course," Dr. Blackwood replied casually. "The anatomy is similar enough to ours for the findings to be applicable, yet without the ethical complications." Sarah's hand trembled slightly as she poured wine into a guest's glass, careful not to spill a drop. Eli's face flashed in her mind, his kind eyes, his quiet dignity. "I've heard rumors," said a plantation owner seated near the end of the table, "of unusually high mortality rates among your specimens." The room fell silent. Dr. Blackwood's smile remained fixed, but Sarah noticed a muscle twitching near his eye. "Science demands sacrifice," he finally replied. "The Negro constitution varies greatly from specimen to specimen. Some simply lack the strength to endure the procedures." "And what exactly do these procedures entail?" Dr. Hammond pressed. Dr. Blackwood dabbed his lips with a napkin. "Perhaps it would be better to show you. After dinner, gentlemen, I propose we adjourn to my research facility. A practical demonstration will answer your questions far more effectively than any description I could provide." A murmur of interest circulated around the table. Sarah felt a chill creep up her spine, despite the warm evening. Whatever was happening in the healing house, these men would soon witness it firsthand. As the dinner concluded, and the guests began moving toward the study for brandy before the promised demonstration, Dr. Hammond lingered behind. Sarah was clearing the last of the dishes when she heard him address Dr. Blackwood in a lowered voice. "Nathaniel, I've known you since medical school. This path you're on, there's something unsound about it. Not just scientifically, but morally." Dr. Blackwood's response was equally quiet but sharp. "Morality is a luxury, James. Progress is a necessity. Would you have us remain in the dark ages of medicine while our patients suffer and die from conditions we might cure?" "Not at such a cost," Dr. Hammond replied. "I've heard things, Nathaniel, things that go beyond legitimate research." "Then stay for the demonstration," Dr. Blackwood said. "Judge with your own eyes." As they left the dining room, Sarah realized she'd been holding her breath. Something terrible was happening in the healing house, something beyond the ordinary cruelties of slavery that she had endured her whole life. And tonight, it seemed, a new victim would be chosen for whatever demonstration the doctor planned. The kitchen was a flurry of activity as Sarah entered with the remaining dishes. Isaiah gave her a questioning look. "They're going to the healing house after Brandy," she whispered as she passed him, "for a demonstration." Isaiah's face darkened. "Then it'll be someone's last night under this roof." "We have to do something," Sarah said, setting down the stack of plates. "Whatever he's doing in there, it's killing people." "And what would you have us do?" Isaiah's voice was bitter. "We're property, girl. Less than the dogs they hunt with." "Eli would have tried," Sarah insisted, "and Eli is dead." Isaiah turned away, but not before Sarah saw the glint of tears in his eyes. Later, as the guests gathered in the foyer preparing to walk to the healing house, Sarah overheard Dr. Blackwood instructing Mrs. Blackwood, "Have the girl, the Whitefield one, sent to the facility after we arrive. I'll need an assistant, and she seems intelligent enough to follow basic instructions." Mrs. Blackwood's lips tightened. "Is that wise, using an untrained field hand? My usual assistant is indisposed. The girl will suffice for tonight's purposes." Sarah backed away silently, her mind racing. She had minutes at most before she would be summoned to the healing house, to assist in whatever horrific procedure awaited. She hurried to the kitchen, finding Isaiah alone, cleaning the last of the cookware. "He wants me in the healing house," she gasped. "As an assistant." Isaiah froze, a dripping pot in his hands. "Jesus, have mercy," he whispered. "What does he do in there, Isaiah?" "What am I going to see?" The older man set down the pot, drying his hands on his apron. "I've never been inside during a procedure, but I've helped clean up after." He looked at Sarah, his eyes haunted. "He cuts into them, Sarah, while they're awake. Says the reactions are important to record. Sometimes he puts things inside them. Metal pieces, chemicals. Sometimes he takes parts out." Sarah felt her stomach lurch. Why? What is he trying to learn? "He believes Negro flesh and white flesh respond differently to pain, that our nerves are constructed differently. He's trying to prove it, trying to find scientific evidence that we're less than human." Isaiah grabbed her arm. "Whatever you see in there tonight, don't show emotion, don't question. If he thinks you're unreliable, you'll move from assistant to subject faster than you can blink," a sharp voice called from the doorway. "Sarah, the doctor is waiting for you at the facility. Go at once." Sarah met Isaiah's eyes one last time before turning to follow Mrs. Blackwood's command. The night air had cooled as she crossed the yard to the healing house, but sweat beaded on her forehead nonetheless. The building's interior was brightly lit, smelling of alcohol and something metallic that Sarah recognized as blood. The main room was arranged like a theater, rows of chairs facing a central space where a large table stood. The doctor's guests were already seated, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and unease. Dr. Blackwood stood beside the table, now wearing a long apron over his dinner clothes. He beckoned Sarah forward. "Gentlemen, tonight we will observe the differential response to precise nervous stimulation. I've selected a particularly robust specimen, one that should withstand the full range of tests." From a side door, two men Sarah had never seen before dragged in a third figure, a young man, perhaps 20, his wrists and ankles bound with leather straps. His eyes were wide with terror. "This will be your assistant," Dr. Blackwood told Sarah, pointing to the bound man. "You will help me demonstrate that what we consider pain in the Negro is fundamentally different from what we whites experience, proof of their suitability for their station in life." Sarah stared at the doctor, then at the terrified man, understanding washing over her like ice water. She wasn't being called to assist in an experiment, she was being made part of one. The healing house fell silent as Dr. Blackwood instructed the two men to secure the young enslaved man to the table. Sarah stood frozen, her hands trembling slightly as leather straps were tightened around the man's wrists, ankles, and torso. She recognized him now, Marcus, who had arrived just a week ago from a plantation in the countryside. "Sarah, Doctor," Blackwood said sharply, pulling her attention back. "Stand here." He positioned her beside the table where Marcus lay struggling against his restraints. "Gentlemen," the doctor addressed his audience, "tonight's demonstration will compare nervous responses between specimens. The girl will serve as our control." A murmur rippled through the seated men. Dr. Hammond stood abruptly. "Blackwood, you said nothing about experimenting on two subjects simultaneously." "Not experimenting, James. Demonstrating," Dr. Blackwood corrected. "The girl will experience minimal discomfort, I assure you. The purpose is to show the marked difference in pain threshold and nervous reactivity." Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. She glanced at Marcus, whose eyes were now fixed on her, a silent plea for help that she was powerless to answer. "Begin your notes, gentlemen," Dr. Blackwood announced, moving to a side table covered with instruments. He selected what looked like a small metal rod. "First, we'll establish baseline sensitivity to mild stimuli." Without warning, he pressed the rod against Sarah's forearm. A sharp, burning sensation shot through her skin, and she bit her lip to suppress a cry. Dr. Blackwood watched her reaction carefully before turning to apply the same instrument to Marcus's arm with visibly greater pressure. Marcus jerked against his restraints, a muffled sound escaping through clenched teeth. "Note the minimal response, Doctor," Blackwood commented. "Despite significantly increased pressure, this demonstrates the first principle of Negro nervous anatomy, diminished sensory perception in peripheral nerves." Sarah fought to keep her face neutral, remembering Isaiah's warning. But inside, rage and fear battled for dominance. The doctor was deliberately causing pain, then lying about the reactions he observed. "For our next demonstration," Dr. Blackwood continued, "we'll examine the concept of referred pain." He selected a different instrument, this one resembling a small clamp. In white subjects, stimulation at certain points creates sensation in seemingly unconnected areas of the body. He attached the clamp to Sarah's index finger, slowly tightening it. The pain was immediate and intense, radiating from her finger up her arm. Tears formed in her eyes, despite her determination to remain stoic. "Observe the reaction," Dr. Blackwood told his audience. "Clear discomfort, nervous system fully engaged." He removed the clamp from Sarah's finger, then applied it to Marcus with brutal efficiency. "Now watch the Negro subject." Marcus's entire body tensed, veins standing out on his neck as he fought against screaming. Sweat poured down his face. "Minimal response," Dr. Blackwood declared, contradicting the evidence before everyone's eyes. "The nervous system shows compartmentalization. Pain remains localized rather than referred throughout the body." "That's not what I'm observing," Dr. Hammond interjected. "The subject is clearly experiencing significant distress." Dr. Blackwood smiled thinly. "What you're seeing is muscular response, not nervous sensitivity. Allow me to demonstrate further." For the next 30 minutes, Dr. Blackwood subjected both Sarah and Marcus to increasingly painful tests, each time declaring that Marcus's reactions proved his theories about fundamental differences between black and white nervous systems. Sarah endured her share of the torture while watching Marcus suffer far worse, his body convulsing against the restraints as the doctor employed more invasive methods. Several of the guests appeared increasingly uncomfortable. Two had excused themselves already, unable to stomach the proceedings. Dr. Hammond remained, his face a mask of barely contained outrage. "For my final demonstration," Dr. Blackwood announced, "we move to the culmination of my research, direct nervous system access." He turned to a covered tray and unveiled a set of surgical instruments. Sarah's blood ran cold. "Blackwood, this has gone far enough," Dr. Hammond said, standing again. "What you're proposing is not science, it's butchery." "Science often appears barbaric to the unenlightened, James." Dr. Blackwood selected a scalpel. Gentlemen who wish to observe revolutionary medical advancement will stay. Others may excuse themselves. 3 more men stood and left, muttering apologies. 4 remained, including Dr. Hammond, who moved closer to the demonstration area. "I'll stay to ensure some semblance of medical ethics is observed," he declared. Dr. Blackwood seemed unbothered by the departures. "Sarah, you'll assist me now. Hold these." He thrust a tray of instruments into her hands. "Stand there and don't move." As he turned to prepare the incision site on Marcus's exposed back, Dr. Hammond approached Sarah. "Girl," he whispered urgently, "what's your name?" "Sarah, sir," she replied softly, her eyes darting to Dr. Blackwood, who was focused on his preparations. "Sarah, listen carefully. What he's doing here is wrong, not just morally, scientifically. He's falsifying results, seeing what he wants to see." Dr. Hammond's voice was barely audible. "Has he done this before to others?" "Yes, sir," Sarah whispered. "Many times. They don't survive." Dr. Hammond's face hardened. "I suspected as much. I need— Hammond, step away from my assistant." Dr. Blackwood's voice cracked through the room. "Your interference is disrupting scientific procedure." Dr. Hammond straightened. "I'm observing, Nathaniel. As a fellow physician, I have questions about your methodology. Save your questions for the discussion afterward." Dr. Blackwood turned back to Marcus. "Now, gentlemen, observe closely. I'll expose the spinal nerves to demonstrate their unique properties in the Negro anatomy." Sarah watched in horror as the doctor positioned his scalpel over Marcus's back. This was how Eli had died, on this table, under this man's knife, all in the name of a science built on lies. In that moment, something broke inside her. The careful restraint that had kept her alive through years of slavery shattered. Without conscious thought, Sarah's fingers closed around a heavy brass instrument on the tray she held. "Doctor," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, "I don't believe this is right." The room went silent. Dr. Blackwood turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" "I said this isn't right." Sarah's grip tightened on the brass object. "You're lying about what you see. You're killing people to prove something that isn't true." The doctor's face flushed with anger. "Put down that tray and get out. You've just volunteered to be tomorrow's subject." "Sarah," Dr. Hammond cautioned, "be careful." Dr. Blackwood turned to his remaining guests. "You see, gentlemen, this is what happens when we treat them with too much leniency. They begin to think themselves capable of understanding matters beyond their comprehension." He reached for Sarah, intending to take the tray from her hands. In that instant, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She swung the tray upward, sending the instruments clattering across the floor. In the same motion, she brought the brass implement down hard on Dr. Blackwood's outstretched arm. The crack of breaking bone echoed through the healing house. The doctor screamed, clutching his injured arm to his chest. "Restrain her!" he shouted to the attendants who had brought Marcus in. The men moved towards Sarah, but Dr. Hammond stepped between them. "Stop!" he commanded. "This has gone far enough." "She attacked me!" Dr. Blackwood spat. "She'll hang for this." "After what I've witnessed tonight," Dr. Hammond replied coldly, "I think many people will have questions about what happens in this building, Nathaniel." He turned to the other guests. "Gentlemen, I believe we've seen enough to form our own conclusions about Dr. Blackwood's research." The remaining guests shifted uncomfortably, looking between Dr. Blackwood, who continued to cradle his broken arm, and Dr. Hammond, who stood protectively near Sarah. "This Negro is my property," Dr. Blackwood hissed through his pain, "and I'll deal with her as I see fit." "Actually," Dr. Hammond corrected, "she belongs to Whitefield, as I recall you mentioning, and I think he would be very interested to hear how his valuable property has been treated." One of the attendants took advantage of the distraction to lunge at Sarah, grabbing her arm roughly. She fought back, striking out with the brass implement still clutched in her hand. The man staggered backward, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. The healing house erupted into chaos. The remaining guests fled for the door while the second attendant rushed to help his injured colleague. Dr. Blackwood shouted for someone to restrain Sarah, but no one moved to obey. In the confusion, Sarah darted to the table where Marcus lay. Her fingers worked frantically at the leather straps binding his wrists. "What are you doing?" he gasped as the first restraint came free. "Getting you out of here," Sarah replied, moving to the second strap. "We can't stay, not after this." Dr. Hammond appeared beside her, helping with the remaining restraints. "You need to leave, both of you," he said urgently. "What you've done tonight will have consequences." "They'll hunt us down," Marcus said as Sarah freed his ankles. "Runaway slaves don't get far in Virginia." "Head north," Dr. Hammond advised, glancing toward Dr. Blackwood, who had collapsed into a chair, his face pale with pain and fury. "I have connections with people who can help. There's a church on the north edge of town, Reverend Miller's place. Tell him James Hammond sent you. He'll know what to do." Sarah helped Marcus sit up, his body still trembling from the ordeal. "Why are you helping us?" she asked Dr. Hammond. The physician's face was grim. "Because what I saw tonight wasn't science. It was evil wearing the mask of progress. Go quickly, before the authorities are called." Sarah grabbed Marcus's arm, supporting him as they moved toward the door. Behind them, Dr. Blackwood had managed to stand again. "You'll never make it," he called after them. "A pair of runaway Negroes in Virginia. You'll be back here within days, and what happens then will make tonight seem merciful. Sarah paused at the doorway, turning to face her tormentor one last time. "No," she said with quiet certainty. "I'll die before I let you put anyone else on that table." Outside, the night air hit them like a blessing after the stifling atmosphere of the healing house. Sarah guided Marcus across the yard, staying close to the shadows of buildings. They needed to reach the slave quarters, where Isaiah might help them, but the main house loomed between them and safety. "We can't go through the house," Marcus whispered, his breathing labored. "They'll catch us for sure." Sarah assessed their surroundings. "There's a path behind the garden. If we can reach it without being seen, we might make it to the quarters." A shout from the healing house indicated their escape had been noticed. Lanterns began to light in the main house, and Sarah heard Mrs. Blackwood's voice calling for the house servants. "We need to move now," Sarah urged, pulling Marcus toward the garden's edge. They had almost reached the cover of the tall hedges when the back door of the main house burst open. Isaiah emerged, his eyes scanning the darkness until he spotted them. "This way," he called softly, gesturing urgently. Sarah hesitated, uncertain if they could trust anyone in that moment of desperation. "Sarah, come," Isaiah insisted. "They're gathering men to search for you. I know a safer way." Making a split-second decision, Sarah guided Marcus toward Isaiah, who ushered them quickly through a side entrance to the house and into a narrow corridor leading to the kitchen. "What happened?" Isaiah demanded as he closed the door behind them. "I struck the doctor," Sarah confessed. "Broke his arm, I think." Isaiah's eyes widened. "Jesus Christ, girl. Then there's no going back for either of you." He moved to a cupboard, pulling out a bundle wrapped in cloth. "I've been saving these. Never thought I'd have the courage to use them myself." He unwrapped the bundle to reveal bread, dried meat, and a small knife. "It's not much, but it might keep you alive until you reach safer ground. We're going to Reverend Miller's church," Sarah told him. "Dr. Hammond said he could help." Isaiah nodded. "Hammond's one of the decent ones. If he sent you there, it's your best chance." He handed the provisions to Sarah. "There's a cellar door that opens to the alley behind the house. The night watchman won't be expecting anyone to come from inside." "Come with us," Marcus urged. Isaiah shook his head sadly. "My wife is here, and our children. I can't leave them." He squeezed Sarah's shoulder. "Go, and may God protect you both." Sarah embraced the man who had been her only friend in this house of horrors. "Thank you," she whispered. Isaiah led them to the cellar and unlocked the heavy wooden door. "Stay off the main roads," he advised, "and if you hear dogs, find water and walk in it as far as you can." With a final nod of farewell, Sarah and Marcus slipped out into the alley, the first steps of their desperate flight into the unknown darkness of a Virginia night. They moved as quietly as possible through Richmond's back streets, avoiding the gaslights and staying in shadows whenever possible. Marcus's condition worried Sarah. He leaned heavily on her, his breath coming in ragged gasps after Dr. Blackwood's demonstrations. "We need to rest," she whispered, as they ducked into a narrow space between two buildings. "Just for a moment." Marcus slid down against the wall. "I don't think I can make it to the church," he admitted. "You should go on without me." "No," Sarah said firmly. "We leave together, or not at all." She unwrapped Isaiah's provisions, breaking off a small piece of bread. "Eat this. You need strength." As Marcus chewed the bread weakly, Sarah assessed their situation. They were still dangerously close to Dr. Blackwood's house. By now the doctor would have sent riders to alert the slave catchers and night patrol. Soon the streets would be crawling with men hunting for them. Distant shouting confirmed her fears. The hunt had begun. "We have to move," she urged, helping Marcus to his feet. "The church can't be far." They continued their northward journey through the sleeping city, every shadow seeming to hide a potential captor, every sound causing them to freeze in terror. Twice they were forced to hide as mounted patrols clattered past, lanterns sweeping the street. After what seemed like hours, they spotted a simple wooden steeple silhouetted against the night sky. Reverend Miller's church stood at the edge of town, a humble building surrounded by a small cemetery. "We made it," Sarah breathed, relief washing over her. But as they approached the church, her heart sank. The building was dark and still, no sign of life or sanctuary. "What do we do now?" Marcus asked, his voice weak. Sarah studied the church, noticing a small cottage behind it that likely served as the Reverend's home. "We try there," she decided. They had just started toward the cottage when the sound of approaching horses reached them. Lantern lights spilled around the corner of the street they had just left. "Run," Sarah urged, pulling Marcus toward the church. With no time to reach the cottage, they ducked behind a large gravestone as riders appeared. From their hiding place, Sarah counted 4 men on horseback, one carrying a lantern held high. "They said the runaways might head this way," one man called. "Check the church." Sarah's mind raced. If they remained hidden, they would eventually be found. If they ran, they would be seen immediately. Their brief taste of freedom was about to end. Suddenly, a light appeared in the cottage window. The door opened and a figure emerged carrying a lantern. "What's all this commotion at this hour?" a deep voice called out. Reverend Miller, awakened by the search party. "Looking for runaways, Reverend," one of the riders replied. 2 Negroes from Dr. Blackwood's place. One attacked the doctor himself, broke his arm, if you can believe it. "Good heavens," the Reverend exclaimed. "What is the world coming to?" "Well, they're certainly not in my church. I've been reading scriptures all evening and would have heard anyone enter." "Mind if we check anyway?" the lead rider asked. "Be my guest," Reverend Miller replied, "though I'll thank you to treat the Lord's house with respect. I'll unlock the door for you." Sarah watched anxiously as the Reverend led the men to the church entrance. As he unlocked the door, he glanced in their direction, a quick, deliberate look that told Sarah he knew exactly where they were hiding. While the search party entered the church with their lanterns, the Reverend remained outside, seemingly admiring the night sky. Slowly, casually, he began walking toward the cemetery. "When I give the signal," he murmured as he passed near their hiding place, pretending to straighten a fallen flower arrangement on a grave. "Run to the cottage, back door. It's unlocked." Without waiting for their response, he walked back to the church entrance just as the riders emerged. "Nothing, Reverend," the lead man reported. "Sorry to disturb your evening." "Not at all," Reverend Miller replied genially. "I pray you find these poor lost souls. They must be very desperate indeed." He raised his voice slightly. "Well, gentlemen, I believe they've likely continued northward. There's a crossroads about a mile up that way that would take them toward the river." The riders nodded their thanks and remounted their horses. As they turned to leave, the Reverend dropped his handkerchief. The signal. Sarah and Marcus seized the moment, darting from their hiding place toward the cottage while the riders' backs were turned. They slipped around the side of the small building and through the unlocked back door into a warm kitchen just as the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance. Inside, an elderly black woman stood by the stove, unsurprised by their sudden entrance. "I'm Ruth," she said simply, "the Reverend's housekeeper. Sit before you fall down." Marcus collapsed gratefully into a chair, while Sarah remained standing tense and alert. "It's all right, child," Ruth said gently. "You're safe for the moment." "How did the Reverend know we were there?" Sarah asked. "James Hammond sent a boy ahead of you with a message," Ruth explained, placing a cup of tea in front of Marcus. "We've been watching for you since just after midnight." The back door opened again, and Reverend Miller entered, his kind face lined with concern. "They've gone for now, but they'll be back. We don't have much time." He was a tall man in his 60s, with silver hair and the weathered face of someone who had seen much suffering in his lifetime. "Dr. Hammond sent us," Sarah said. "Yes, I know." The Reverend nodded. "James and I have worked together before. He said you witnessed terrible things at Dr. Blackwood's." "He tortures people," Sarah replied, her voice breaking. "Calls it medical research, but it's just torture. And he lies about what he sees to prove Negroes are different, less human." Reverend Miller's expression darkened. "Blackwood's research has been the subject of rumors for months, but no one could prove anything. Until now. Will you help us?" Marcus asked weakly. "Yes," the Reverend assured them. "But you must understand, your situation is grave. Sarah, you assaulted a white man. That alone is a hanging offense in Virginia. You can never return, and you'll be hunted far beyond the borders of this state." "I know," Sarah acknowledged. The reality of what she had done, the irrevocable step she had taken, was finally sinking in. "We'll help you get north," Reverend Miller continued. "But the journey will be dangerous, especially now, with Blackwood's influence ensuring every patrol and slave catcher in the state will be looking for you." Ruth returned from another room with clean clothing and bandages. "First, we tend to your wounds," she insisted, gently helping Marcus remove his tattered shirt to reveal the marks of Dr. Blackwood's demonstrations. Sarah watched as Ruth cleaned and bandaged Marcus's injuries, her skilled hands suggesting she had performed this service many times before. When she finished with Marcus, she turned to Sarah. "Your turn, child." As Ruth tended to Sarah's less severe wounds, Reverend Miller outlined their plan. "You'll leave before dawn. A wagon will take you to a farm about 20 miles north of here. From there, you'll continue with different guides, people who believe, as I do, that all humans are created equal in God's eyes." "The Underground Railroad," Sarah whispered. She had heard rumors of its existence, a secret network of people helping enslaved individuals escape to freedom in the North. "Yes," the Reverend confirmed, "but understand this. The road to freedom is long and perilous. Many start the journey, not all complete it." Marcus straightened in his chair, a new determination in his eyes, despite his weakened state. "Better to die trying than live under men like Blackwood." Reverend Miller nodded gravely. "Rest now, both of you. In a few hours, your new life begins." As Ruth prepared pallets for them near the kitchen fire, Sarah found herself thinking of Isaiah and the others still trapped in Dr. Blackwood's household. She had escaped the doctor's table, but how many more would die there if his research continued? "Reverend," she said quietly, "Dr. Blackwood has records. Journals documenting everything he's done. Dr. Hammond saw some of it tonight. Could those be used to stop him?" The Reverend considered her words carefully. "Perhaps. If such evidence reached the right hands, it might at least end his experiments. Even in the South, there are limits to what is accepted in the name of science." "Dr. Hammond knows," Sarah insisted. "He saw what was happening. He could testify." "James Hammond is one man against a respected Richmond physician," Reverend Miller cautioned. "But I'll speak with him." Perhaps together we can find a way to bring Blackwood's sins to light. Sarah nodded, exhaustion finally overtaking her as she settled onto the pallet. As sleep claimed her, she clung to a fragile hope that her desperate act of rebellion might somehow help those left behind. Outside the Reverend's cottage, Richmond continued its uneasy sleep, unaware that the events of this night would eventually force the city to confront the darkness festering within its most respected homes. A reckoning that would begin with a doctor's broken arm and an enslaved woman's courage to say enough. Dawn broke over Richmond, painting the sky in pale pinks and golds that belied the darkness of the night before. In Reverend Miller's cottage, Sarah awoke with a start, momentarily disoriented until the events of the previous night came rushing back. Dr. Blackwood, the healing house, their desperate escape. Marcus still slept on the pallet beside hers, his face relaxed in slumber despite the bruises and bandages. Ruth moved quietly around the small kitchen, preparing something that filled the room with the comforting aroma of cornbread and coffee. "You're awake," the older woman observed, her voice low so as not to disturb Marcus. "Good. There's much to do before you leave." Sarah sat up, wincing at the pain from her injuries. "What time is it?" "Just after 5, Ruth replied. "The wagon will be here at 6. Eat something while you can." Sarah accepted a plate of cornbread and a small cup of coffee, luxuries she rarely enjoyed at Whitefield Plantation or Dr. Blackwood's household. As she ate, Reverend Miller entered from outside, his expression grave. "The city's in an uproar," he reported. "Patrols have been doubled. They're stopping every wagon and checking every Negro on the streets. Dr. Blackwood has offered a substantial reward for your capture." Sarah's appetite vanished. "Then we can't leave. We'll be caught for certain." "Not necessarily," the Reverend countered, taking a seat at the small table. "Our plan has changed, but the route remains open. Instead of leaving by wagon, you'll travel in a different way." He glanced at Marcus, who had awakened and was listening intently. "A more uncomfortable way, I'm afraid." Before he could elaborate, a soft knock at the back door interrupted them. Ruth answered it, admitting a nervous-looking young white man dressed as a tradesman. "Reverend," the newcomer nodded respectfully. "The preparations are complete." "Thank you, Thomas." Reverend Miller gestured to Sarah and Marcus. "These are our travelers." Thomas assessed them with concern. "The man doesn't look strong enough for the journey," he said bluntly. "I'll manage," Marcus insisted, struggling to sit up straighter. "You must," Reverend Miller said. "There's no alternative now." He turned back to Thomas. "What news from town?" Thomas shook his head. "It's bad. They're saying the woman attacked Dr. Blackwood unprovoked, that she's dangerous and possibly deranged. They've got descriptions of both of them posted at every crossroads." Sarah felt a chill run through her. "What about Isaiah, the others at the doctor's house?" "All the doctor's slaves are being questioned," Thomas replied. "One older man was taken to the jailhouse last night. They believe he helped you escape." Sarah closed her eyes, guilt washing over her. Isaiah had risked everything to help them, and now he was paying the price. "We need to leave now," Marcus said, his voice stronger than before. "Every hour we stay puts the Reverend and Ruth in danger too." Reverend Miller nodded. "Thomas will explain the plan. I must return to the church. My absence would be noticed, and we can't afford suspicion." He placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "Trust in God, and in those who guide you. The road ahead is long, but freedom waits at its end." After the Reverend departed, Thomas outlined their escape route. "You'll be traveling in a special wagon with a false bottom, hidden beneath crates of produce bound for Petersburg. It's cramped and uncomfortable, but slave patrols rarely search shipments thoroughly if the papers are in order." "And if they do search?" Marcus asked. Thomas's expression was grim. "Then we pray." For the next hour, Ruth helped them prepare. She dressed them in clean, nondescript clothing and packed a small bundle of provisions, bread, dried meat, and a gourd of water. Most importantly, she gave them each a folded paper containing directions written in code. "Memorize these," she instructed, "then destroy them. If you're separated from your guides, these will help you find the next safe house. Sarah studied the paper intently, committing the strange symbols and phrases to memory. "Follow the drinking gourd" was written at the top, a reference to the Big Dipper constellation that pointed north to freedom. As 6 o'clock approached, Thomas grew increasingly anxious. "The wagon should be here by now," he muttered, peering out the window. "Something's wrong." A tense silence fell over the cottage. Every minute that passed increased the danger of discovery. Finally, just as Thomas was preparing to leave and investigate, the sound of approaching wagon wheels reached them. But instead of relief, Thomas's face filled with alarm. "That's not our wagon," he whispered. "It's a delivery cart. Someone's coming to the cottage." Ruth quickly ushered Sarah and Marcus into a small pantry. "Stay silent," she ordered, closing the door. Through a crack in the wooden door, Sarah watched as Ruth opened the cottage door to receive a delivery of supplies from a local merchant. Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain it would give them away. The merchant lingered, making small talk about the excitement in town. "Quite the commotion about those runaways," he commented. "They're searching every building on this side of town." "Is that so?" Ruth replied, her voice betraying nothing. "Well, I hope they find them before anyone else gets hurt. Those who attack their masters rarely have God in their hearts." After what seemed an eternity, the merchant finally departed. Thomas immediately went to the window. "Our wagon is coming now," he announced. "But we've got a problem. There's a patrol on the main road." Sarah and Marcus emerged from their hiding place, exchanging worried glances. "We need a distraction," Thomas decided. He turned to Ruth. "The shed behind the church. It's full of old hymnals, yes?" Ruth nodded slowly, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Yes, materials we no longer use." "A fire would draw attention," Thomas suggested. "Give us time to get you both into the wagon without being seen." "You're proposing to burn church property?" Marcus asked incredulously. "Not the church," Thomas clarified. "Just the shed, a small sacrifice for a greater cause." Ruth was already gathering what they needed. "Go," she told Thomas. "I'll handle the fire. It's less suspicious if I'm seen near the buildings." Thomas nodded and turned to Sarah and Marcus. "When you hear the commotion, follow me to the wagon. Move quickly but stay low. The driver knows what to do." Ruth squeezed Sarah's hand before they parted. "May God watch over you, child. Remember what brought you to this moment, not just the doctor's cruelty, but your courage to stand against it. That same courage will carry you to freedom." With those final words of comfort, Ruth slipped out the back door toward the church, while Thomas led Sarah and Marcus to the edge of the property where they could see the approaching wagon. They didn't wait long. Within minutes, shouts of "Fire!" erupted from the direction of the church. As predicted, the patrol immediately abandoned their post to help with the emergency. "Now!" Thomas urged. They darted across the open ground to where the wagon had stopped behind a stand of trees. The driver, a weathered man with a thick beard, worked quickly to shift crates of vegetables, revealing a narrow space beneath the wagon's false bottom. "In you go," he ordered. "Quickly!" The space was even smaller than Sarah had imagined. Barely enough room for two people to lie side by side. Marcus went first, sliding into the cramped compartment with difficulty due to his injuries. Sarah followed, pressing herself against him in the stifling darkness as the driver replaced the crates above them. "Stay silent, no matter what happens," the driver instructed through a small air hole. "We'll be stopping at checkpoints. If you're discovered, we'll all hang." The weight of his words settled over Sarah as the wagon began to move. The space was hot, airless, and reeked of earth and sweat. Every bump in the road sent jolts of pain through her bruised body. Beside her, Marcus breathed in shallow gasps, clearly struggling with the confinement. Time lost all meaning in that dark, cramped space. Sarah focused on her breathing, on the memory of Ruth's words, on the hope of freedom that lay somewhere ahead. Twice the wagon stopped for inspections. Each time her heart seemed to stop as well, resuming only when they began moving again. After what might have been hours or an eternity, the wagon finally came to a complete halt. The crates above them shifted, and daylight suddenly flooded their hiding place. "Quickly!" an unfamiliar voice urged. "We've reached the first safe house." Stiff and disoriented, Sarah emerged from the wagon to find themselves at a small farm. The sun was high overhead. They had traveled through the morning. Marcus followed with difficulty, his face pale and drawn. Their new host was a middle-aged black man who introduced himself simply as Daniel. He led them quickly to a barn, away from the main house where they might be spotted by passing travelers. "You'll rest here tonight," Daniel explained. "Tomorrow night you continue northward." As Sarah helped Marcus settle onto a pallet of clean straw, Daniel provided them with fresh water and more substantial food than they had seen in days. "What news from Richmond?" Sarah asked between grateful bites of a ham sandwich. Daniel's expression darkened. "It's all anyone's talking about. Dr. Blackwood has sworn vengeance. He's claiming you tried to murder him as part of a planned uprising." Sarah's hand trembled. "That's not true." "Truth matters little when a white doctor makes accusations against escaped slaves," Daniel replied. "But there's other news that might interest you. Dr. Hammond has publicly questioned Blackwood's account. He was at the demonstration, he says, and what he witnessed was criminal abuse disguised as medical research." Hope flickered in Sarah's chest. "He's speaking out?" "At considerable risk to his reputation," Daniel confirmed. "The medical community is divided. Some support Blackwood, but others are demanding an investigation into his research practices." "What about Isaiah?" Sarah asked. "The man who helped us escape." Daniel's face grew solemn. "He's still being held. They're trying to make him reveal where you might have gone." The news settled like a stone in Sarah's stomach. While she and Marcus moved toward freedom, others paid the price for their escape. "Try not to dwell on it," Daniel advised, seeing her expression. "You can't help him by being caught. The best thing you can do now is reach safety." After Daniel left them to rest, Marcus reached for Sarah's hand in the dim light of the barn. "You did the right thing," he said softly, standing up to the doctor. No one had ever done that before. "I got you into this," Sarah replied, guilt weighing on her. "You were just there, on that table. I'm the one who struck him. And if you hadn't, I'd be dead now," Marcus pointed out. "Like Eli and the others. You saved me, Sarah. Whatever happens, remember that." His words offered little comfort, as Sarah contemplated the long, dangerous journey still ahead of them, and those left behind. That night, as they prepared to continue their journey, Daniel brought disturbing news. "There's a slave catcher named Holt who's taken a special interest in your case," he warned. "Blackwood has hired him specifically, offered a bonus beyond the posted reward." "What does that mean for us?" Sarah asked. "It means he'll be more persistent than most," Daniel explained. "Holt has a reputation for tracking runaways further north than others would go. You'll need to be especially careful." Their next mode of transportation proved to be a covered wagon carrying bales of cotton. Once again, they were concealed in a hidden compartment, this time beneath the driver's seat. Their new guide was a Quaker woman named Elizabeth Thornton, whose gentle manner belied a fierce commitment to the abolitionist cause. "The next leg of your journey will take you across the border into Maryland," she explained as they prepared to depart. "From there, the network will guide you to Pennsylvania and freedom." The journey continued in this manner for days, traveling by night in various disguises and conveyances, resting by day in barns, cellars, and attics of those sympathetic to their cause. Each safe house brought news. The search for them continued unabated, with Dr. Blackwood using his influence to keep their escape in the public consciousness. But there was other news too. Dr. Hammond had not remained silent about what he had witnessed in the healing house. Supported by 2 other physicians who had attended that fateful dinner, he had submitted formal complaints to the Virginia Medical Society regarding Dr. Blackwood's experiments. "People are beginning to ask questions," one host told them as they reached the Maryland border, "about what really happens in that healing house, about how many slaves have died there. For Sarah, each step northward brought a mixture of hope and fear. Hope for the freedom that awaited, fear of the slave catchers who pursued them. Marcus's condition improved gradually, his strength returning as the distance between them and Richmond increased. 10 days into their journey, they reached a farm in northern Maryland, owned by a free black family named Johnson. For the first time since their escape, they were able to sleep in real beds and eat at a proper table. "You're nearly there," Mrs. Johnson encouraged them over breakfast. "Pennsylvania is less than 20 miles north. Once you cross that line, you'll be in a free state." "What happens then?" Marcus asked. Mr. Johnson's expression grew serious. "Being in a free state doesn't guarantee your safety. The fugitive slave law means you can still be captured and returned south. You'll need to continue to Canada to be truly free." The reality of their situation, that even crossing into Pennsylvania wouldn't end their peril, was sobering, but they had come too far to turn back. That evening, as they prepared for the final leg of their journey into Pennsylvania, an unexpected visitor arrived at the Johnson farm. The family tensed as a carriage approached, but their anxiety turned to cautious relief when they recognized the driver as a known conductor on the Underground Railroad. The visitor who emerged from the carriage, however, was a shock to Sarah. Dr. James Hammond, looking exhausted from hard travel. "Thank God I found you," he said when Sarah and Marcus were brought to meet him. "I've been following your path for days." "How did you find us?" Sarah asked, suspicious despite their previous alliance. "The Reverend told me which route you had taken," Hammond explained. "I've visited every safe house between here and Richmond." He looked around nervously. "We don't have much time. Holt is close behind me, perhaps only hours away." "Holt? The slave catcher?" Mr. Johnson asked sharply. Hammond nodded. "He's tracked you this far by bribing and threatening people along the way. Some of the safe houses have been compromised." He turned to Sarah. "But that's not the only reason I came. There's something you need to know." From his coat, Hammond withdrew a leather-bound journal. "This is one of Blackwood's research journals. I took it the night you escaped. Thought it might provide evidence of his crimes." Sarah stared at the journal, remembering the doctor meticulously recording his observations as he tortured his subjects. "It's worse than I imagined," Hammond continued. "He's been conducting these experiments for years. Dozens of slaves have died on his table, all carefully documented as if they were nothing more than laboratory specimens." "We knew that," Sarah said quietly. "Those of us who worked in his house, we knew." "Yes, but now others know too," Hammond replied. "I've presented this evidence to the Medical Society and to certain newspapers in Philadelphia. Blackwood's reputation is crumbling as we speak." Hope flared in Sarah's heart. "What about Isaiah? The others still at Blackwood's house?" "Isaiah is safe," Hammond assured her. "I managed to purchase him from Blackwood, claimed I needed an experienced house servant. He's on his way north with another group." Hammond's expression darkened. "But Blackwood still has others. His research continues, though now with more secrecy." Marcus leaned forward. "So nothing has really changed." "Not yet," Hammond acknowledged. "But it will. These journals contain evidence not just of cruelty, but of scientific fraud. Blackwood has been falsifying his findings for years, building his reputation on lies." He closed the journal. "The medical community can forgive many things, but not that." Mrs. Johnson, who had been listening by the door, suddenly entered with alarm. "Riders approaching," she announced. "3 men moving fast." Hammond's face paled. "Holt! He must have followed my trail." He turned to Sarah and Marcus. "You need to leave now. I'll delay them." "How?" Sarah demanded. "If Holt finds you here, he'll know we're close." "I have a story prepared," Hammond assured her, "and my status as a physician gives me some protection, but you must go immediately." Mr. Johnson was already in motion, leading them to the back of the house. "There's a creek that runs north through our property," he explained hurriedly. "Follow it for 2 miles and you'll reach the home of Caleb Foster. He'll guide you across the Pennsylvania line tonight." Hammond pressed the journal into Sarah's hands. "Take this with you. If anything happens to me, make sure it reaches the Philadelphia Anti-Slavery Society. They'll know what to do with it." Sarah accepted the journal, understanding its importance, not just as evidence against Dr. Blackwood, but as testament to the suffering of those who had died on his table. People like Eli, whose stories would otherwise be lost to history. With hasty goodbyes, Sarah and Marcus slipped out the back door of the Johnson home and into the gathering dusk. They could hear horses in the front yard as Holt and his men arrived. "This way," Marcus urged, guiding Sarah toward the small creek that marked their escape route. As they moved through the twilight, Sarah glanced back at the Johnson farm one last time. Dr. Hammond had risked everything to help them, his reputation, his safety, perhaps even his life. And for what? 2 escaped slaves he barely knew, and a principle of human dignity that the society around him refused to recognize. They reached the creek and began following its winding path northward toward Pennsylvania and the promise of freedom. But Sarah carried with her more than just the physical burden of Dr. Blackwood's journal. She carried the weight of those left behind, those who had suffered and died, and the knowledge that their journey was far from over. The final miles to freedom would prove to be the most dangerous of all. The creek guided them through darkness, its gentle murmur masking their footsteps as they moved northward. Sarah clutched Dr. Blackwood's journal to her chest, the leather-bound record of atrocities now serving as their most dangerous possession, and their greatest hope for justice. Marcus moved with renewed purpose, his eyes constantly scanning the woods around them for any sign of pursuit. "How much further?" Sarah whispered as they paused to drink from the creek. Marcus looked up at the night sky, locating the North Star as they had been taught. "Can't be more than a mile now. Mr. Johnson said 2 miles to the Foster place." The sound of distant horses brought them both to alert stillness. The noise came from behind them, from the direction of the Johnson farm. "Holt," Sarah breathed, fear constricting her throat. They could be following the creek, Marcus realized. It's the most obvious path. Without another word, they abandoned the waterway, plunging deeper into the forest that flanked it. The going was harder here. Thick undergrowth tore at their clothes and scratched their skin. Every snapping twig sounded like a gunshot in the quiet night. "We need to find the Foster place," Sarah said urgently. "But we've lost our guide." Marcus nodded toward the North Star. "Keep heading that way. Sooner or later we'll hit the road or a farm." The next hour passed in tense silence as they pushed through the forest, the sounds of pursuit growing fainter behind them. Finally, they emerged at the edge of a cleared field. In the distance, a farmhouse stood dark against the night sky. "That could be Foster's," Marcus whispered. "But it could also be anyone's. We can't stay in the open," Sarah decided, "and we can't go back." They circled the field, staying within the tree line until they reached a point closer to the house. A barn stood nearby, its doors closed but not locked. With no better option, they slipped inside. The interior smelled of hay and horses. A lantern hanging on a post provided just enough light to navigate. Sarah sank onto a bale of hay, her legs trembling with exhaustion. "We'll rest here," Marcus suggested, "then approach the house at first light. If it's Foster's, we're safe. If not—" He didn't finish the sentence. Sarah nodded, too tired to argue. She carefully tucked the journal inside her clothing and closed her eyes, listening to the night sounds, the occasional whinny of a horse, the rustle of small creatures in the hay, and the pounding of her own heart. Sleep came in fitful bursts, interrupted by dreams of the healing house and Dr. Blackwood's cold eyes as he prepared to cut into Marcus's flesh. She awoke with a start as grey dawn light filtered through cracks in the barn walls. Marcus was already awake, peering through a small window. "There's smoke coming from the chimney," he reported. "Someone's up." Before they could decide on their next move, the barn door creaked open. They froze as a tall black man entered, carrying a pail of feed for the horses. He spotted them immediately. "Lord have mercy," he murmured, setting down the pail. "You must be the 2 from Richmond." Sarah and Marcus exchanged uncertain glances. "The Johnsons sent word you might be coming," the man continued, "though we expected you last night. I'm Caleb Foster." Relief washed over Sarah. "We had to leave the creek. There were riders." Foster's expression grew serious. "Holt and his men. They came here just after midnight, asking questions." He spat on the ground. "I told them I hadn't seen any runaways, which was true at the time." He gestured toward the door. "Come to the house quickly. My wife has breakfast, and you look like you need it." As they followed Foster across the yard, Sarah noticed how different this farm felt from the southern plantations she had known. Though modest in size, the land was well tended, the buildings in good repair. Most notably, there were no overseers, no white masters, just a family working their own soil. Inside the farmhouse, they were greeted by Mrs. Foster, a strong-looking woman whose smile warmed the simple kitchen. Two children, a boy of about 10 and a girl perhaps 7, watched the strangers curiously from the corner. "Sit, sit," Mrs. Foster urged, placing plates of cornbread and bacon before them. "You must be starving." As they ate, Foster explained their situation. "Pennsylvania's just 8 miles north of here. Normally I'd take you across tonight in the wagon, but with Holt so close, that's too risky." He leaned forward, lowering his voice though they were alone in the house. "There's a group of 5 other runaways hiding in a cave not far from here. They've been waiting 3 days for safe passage. The plan is to move all of you tonight." "How?" Marcus asked between bites of food. "There's a Quaker settlement just across the border," Foster explained. "They're sending a special wagon, one that's never been seen in these parts before. You'll be hidden among crates of goods supposedly bound for Philadelphia." Sarah thought of their journey thus far, the series of hiding places, the constant fear of discovery. "Even in Pennsylvania, we're not truly free, are we? The fugitive slave law." Foster nodded grimly. "That's why you won't be staying there. Once you reach Philadelphia, another conductor will take you to New York, and from there to Canada. Only when you cross that border will you be beyond the reach of U.S. law." The reality of their situation sank in anew. Even after everything they had endured, even after crossing into a free state, they would still be fugitives, hunted, vulnerable, with no legal rights or protections. "What about Dr. Hammond?" Sarah asked, remembering the physician who had risked so much to help them. "Did he get away safely?" Foster exchanged a look with his wife. "Hammond was at the Johnsons when Holt arrived. He claimed to be there on medical business, treating Mr. Johnson for a fever." Foster shook his head admiringly. "Quick thinking, that one. But Holt was suspicious. Last I heard, he was following Hammond back toward Baltimore, thinking the doctor might lead him to you." Sarah felt a pang of concern for their ally, but also relief that Hammond's diversion might give them the time they needed to reach Pennsylvania. After breakfast, Foster led them to a cellar beneath the barn, accessible only through a trapdoor hidden under hay. "You'll be safer here during the day," he explained. "If Holt returns, he's less likely to find you." The cellar was small but clean, with pallets for sleeping and a supply of water and food. "Rest now," Foster advised. "Tonight will be a long journey." Left alone in the dim cellar, Sarah finally had a moment to examine Dr. Blackwood's journal more carefully. The leather-bound book was filled with the doctor's precise handwriting, clinical descriptions of procedures performed on enslaved subjects, complete with diagrams and observations. "I can't believe he wrote it all down," Marcus said, looking over her shoulder at the gruesome details. "Every cut, every scream." "He was proud of it," Sarah replied bitterly. "Thought he was making scientific history." She turned a page and froze. There, in the doctor's meticulous hand, was an entry dated just 3 months earlier. Subject 27, male, age approx. 35, obtained from Whitefield Plantation, exhibited extraordinary nervous response to procedure C, maintained consciousness for 47 minutes despite extensive tissue extraction. Specimen expired at 2:17 p.m. Tissue samples preserved for further study. "Eli," Sarah whispered, tears filling her eyes. This is how he died. Marcus placed a gentle hand on her shoulder as she continued reading, each page revealing new horrors. Experiments designed not to heal or understand, but to prove a predetermined conclusion. That black bodies were fundamentally different, less sensitive to pain, designed for servitude. Hammond was right, Sarah said after reading several entries. Blackwood falsified everything. When the results didn't match his theories, he simply changed them in his records. She closed the journal, unable to bear any more. This has to reach Philadelphia. People need to know what he did, what's still happening in that healing house. The day passed slowly in the hidden cellar. Occasionally, they heard footsteps above as Foster went about his farm work. Once, the children's voices came close, quickly hushed by their mother. By late afternoon, a new tension filled the air, the waiting silence before a crucial mission. Just after sunset, the trapdoor opened. Foster's face appeared, his expression grim. "It's time," he said simply. They emerged from their hiding place to find the barn darkened except for a single lantern. Foster led them to a small door at the rear rather than the main entrance. "Change of plans," he explained in a hushed voice. "Holt came back about an hour ago, asking more questions. He set up checkpoints on all the main roads north." Sarah's heart sank. "Then how do we get across?" "There's another way," Foster assured them. "More dangerous, but less watched. You'll go with Jacob." He nodded toward a young man who had appeared silently beside them, no more than 18, with serious eyes and a determined set to his jaw. "Jacob knows the back trails," Foster continued. "He'll take you to meet the others, then guide you all across the border on foot." "What about the wagon from the Quaker settlement?" Marcus asked. "Too risky now," Foster replied. "Holt's men would certainly stop and search it. This way, you avoid the roads entirely." Jacob spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly deep for his age. "We leave now. It's a 3-hour walk to the cave, then another 4 to the border. We need to cross before dawn." After hasty goodbyes to the Foster family, they followed Jacob into the darkness. He moved with the confidence of someone who knew every tree and stream in the area, leading them along barely visible paths through dense woods. "You're Foster's son?" Sarah asked quietly as they walked. Jacob nodded. "Been helping with this work since I was 12. Know every inch of these woods." After nearly 3 hours of difficult travel, they reached a hillside covered in thick brush. Jacob stopped, making a soft owl call that was immediately answered from somewhere in the darkness. "It's clear," he said, pushing aside branches to reveal the narrow entrance to a cave. Inside, 5 people huddled around a small fire. 3 men, a woman, and a boy of about 13. They looked up warily as Jacob led Sarah and Marcus into their sanctuary. "These are the 2 from Richmond," Jacob explained. "They'll be crossing with us tonight." The group made room by the fire, offering quiet greetings. Sarah learned they had escaped from a plantation in southern Virginia nearly a month ago and had been making their slow way north ever since. "We lost 2 along the way," the woman told Sarah in a whisper. "My sister and her husband. They were caught at the Potomac crossing." Her eyes reflected the firelight, hollow with grief. Sarah shared some of their own story. Dr. Blackwood's experiments, their escape, and the journal they carried. The others listened in horror, then anger. "That journal needs to reach the right hands," one of the men said firmly. "People up north need to see what's really happening down south. They think they know, but they don't." "We're going to get it to the Philadelphia Anti-Slavery Society," Marcus assured him. "Doctor, Hammond said they'll know what to do with it." Jacob, who had been keeping watch at the cave entrance, returned to the fire. "It's time," he announced. "Everyone gather your things. We move quiet, stay close, and don't talk unless necessary." The group extinguished the fire and prepared to leave. Sarah tucked the journal securely inside her shirt, its weight against her skin, a constant reminder of their purpose. Outside, the night had deepened. Clouds obscured the stars, making it darker but providing better cover. Jacob led them upward, away from the valleys where farms and roads followed the natural contours of the land. "We stay on the ridges," he explained in a whisper. "Harder going, but fewer people." The journey was exhausting. The terrain was rough, with steep inclines and treacherous descents. The group moved in single file, Jacob at the lead, Marcus bringing up the rear to ensure no one fell behind. After 2 hours of steady travel, Jacob called a brief halt. As they rested, catching their breath, a distant sound caught Sarah's attention, the faint baying of hounds. "Dogs," she whispered, ice forming in her veins. Jacob tensed, listening. "They're far off, but heading this way," he confirmed. "Holt must have picked up our trail somehow." "What do we do?" the woman asked, clutching her son closer. Jacob thought quickly. "There's a stream about 1/2 mile ahead. We'll follow it for as long as we can. Throw off the scent." They abandoned their rest and pressed on with renewed urgency, the distant howling of the hounds serving as a terrifying motivator. When they reached the stream, Jacob directed everyone to wade through the shallow water, careful not to leave footprints on the banks. They followed the water for nearly a mile before Jacob signaled them to exit on a rocky outcrop that would leave minimal traces. The dogs' baying had grown neither louder nor fainter, still on their trail, but not gaining ground. "The border's less than an hour ahead," Jacob encouraged them. "Once we cross, we'll meet friends who'll hide us until it's safe to continue to Philadelphia." As they pushed forward through the darkness, Sarah found herself walking beside the 13-year-old boy. His face was drawn with exhaustion, but his eyes remained alert. "What's your name?" she asked softly. "Benjamin," he replied. "But everyone calls me Ben." "Are you scared, Ben?" The boy considered the question seriously. "Yes," he admitted. "But my mama says fear only matters if you let it stop you." Sarah smiled despite their dire situation. "Your mama is wise." "We're going to Canada," Ben continued. "Mama says there's schools there where I can learn to read properly. Do you know how to read?" "Yes," Sarah answered, thinking of Eli and the precious scraps of newspaper and Bible pages they had shared in secret. "A friend taught me." "Will you teach me something?" Ben asked. "Just one thing, so I can practice until we reach Canada." Touched by the request, Sarah thought for a moment. Then she whispered the words that had sustained her through the darkest moments of her captivity. "All men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." Ben repeated the phrase carefully, committing it to memory. "What does it mean?" "It means," Sarah replied, "that what we're doing, running toward freedom, is right, that no man should own another, that we deserve to be free simply because we're human." The boy nodded solemnly. "I'll remember." Their whispered conversation ended abruptly as Jacob raised a hand, signaling for silence. The group froze, listening. The dogs' baying had changed direction, growing louder, closer. "They've picked up our trail again," Jacob whispered. "We need to move faster." They abandoned caution for speed, pushing through underbrush and scrambling over rocky ground. Sarah's lungs burned, her legs ached, but the sound of the approaching hounds drove her forward. Finally, Jacob paused at the crest of a ridge. "There," he pointed to a valley below, where a river glimmered faintly in the pre-dawn light. "That's the line. Pennsylvania's on the other side." Hope surged through the exhausted group. Freedom was literally in sight. But as they began their descent toward the river, the baying of the hounds grew suddenly, alarmingly louder. "They're closing in," Marcus warned from the rear. "We won't all make it across in time." The horrible truth of his words sank in. The group included an elderly man who had been struggling to keep pace, the woman with her young son, and others who were near the limits of their endurance. Jacob made a swift decision. "We split up. I'll take the slower ones along the riverside to a crossing I know. Marcus, you and Sarah are the strongest. Take Ben and head straight across. There's a Quaker farm on the other side with a red barn. They'll help you." "What about the journal?" Sarah asked, aware that their mission went beyond their personal safety. "Keep it with you," Jacob instructed. "If we're caught, you must get it to Philadelphia." The group divided quickly, with tearful embraces and whispered good wishes. The woman hugged her son fiercely before placing his hand in Sarah's. Take care of my boy," she pleaded. "I'll find you in Pennsylvania." "I promise," Sarah vowed, knowing it was a promise she might not be able to keep. As Jacob led his group eastward along the riverbank, Sarah, Marcus, and Ben began their direct descent to the river. The hounds sounded closer still. Holt and his men couldn't be far behind. They reached the river's edge as the first hint of dawn lightened the eastern sky. The water flowed dark and swift, perhaps 50 feet across. "Can you swim?" Marcus asked Ben. The boy nodded nervously. "A little. Stay between us," Sarah instructed, securing the journal inside her clothing as best she could. "Hold on to our hands." We crossed together. They waded into the cold water, gasping as it rose to their waists, then chests. When it became too deep to walk, they began to swim, Ben between them, their hands locked together. The current was stronger than anticipated, pulling them downstream as they fought toward the far bank. Sarah's sodden clothes dragged at her, the journal a lead weight against her chest. Ben struggled beside her, his small face determined despite his fear. Behind them, on the Virginia side, shouts and barking erupted as Holt and his men reached the spot they had entered the water. In the growing light, Sarah could see figures on horseback and the larger shapes of the hounds straining at their leashes. "They're going to cross," Marcus gasped as they neared the Pennsylvania shore. "We need to keep moving." They staggered from the river, water streaming from their clothes, and immediately began running toward the distant shape of a red barn visible across open fields. Behind them came splashing sounds as riders entered the water in pursuit. "I can't run anymore," Ben panted, his legs beginning to falter. Without hesitation, Marcus scooped the boy onto his back. "Hold tight," he instructed, and continued running despite the added burden. Sarah ran beside them, her lungs burning, her vision narrowing to the red barn that represented their only hope of safety. Behind them, hoofbeats pounded as the first of Holt's men reached the Pennsylvania shore. "They're gaining," Sarah gasped. The distance to the barn seemed impossible, 200 yards of open field with no cover, no place to hide. Holt and his men would overtake them before they could reach it. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm her, Sarah saw movement at the barn, figures emerging, running toward them. As they drew closer, she could see they were armed men, at least a dozen of them, forming a line between the fugitives and their pursuers. "Keep running!" one of the men shouted to them. "We'll hold them off!" Sarah, Marcus, and Ben stumbled the final yards to reach their rescuers. A group of black and white men from the Quaker settlement, armed with rifles and determined expressions. Holt and his men pulled up short, suddenly outnumbered and outgunned. The lead rider, Holt himself, Sarah presumed, called out angrily, "Those are fugitive slaves. The law requires you to surrender them." An older white man with a gray beard stepped forward from the Pennsylvania group. "This is free soil, sir. Your authority ends at that river." "The fugitive slave law gives me authority anywhere in the Union," Holt countered. "Stand aside or face arrest yourselves." "There are no slaves here," the bearded man replied calmly. "Only free individuals whom you are threatening. I suggest you return to Virginia before this situation becomes untenable." A tense standoff ensued. Holt and his 6 men faced a much larger group of determined defenders. Finally, with a curse, Holt wheeled his horse around. "This isn't over," he warned. "I'll be back with federal marshals." "And we'll be gone," the bearded man answered, "as is our right." Only when Holt and his men had retreated across the river did Sarah allow herself to truly breathe. They were in Pennsylvania. They had made it. The bearded man approached them with kind eyes. "I'm Thomas Wilson. You must be the Richmond fugitives we were told to expect." Sarah nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by exhaustion and emotion. "There are others," she managed to say. "With Jacob, coming along the river. We have people watching for them," Wilson assured her. "They'll be brought safely to the settlement." Inside the barn, they were given dry clothes and hot drinks. Sarah carefully extracted Dr. Blackwood's journal from her wet shirt, relieved to find it had remained relatively protected. "This needs to reach the Philadelphia Anti-Slavery Society," she told Wilson, holding out the sodden book. "It contains evidence of terrible crimes against enslaved people in Richmond." Wilson examined the journal with grave interest. "We have a wagon leaving for Philadelphia this afternoon," he said. "You'll all be on it, along with this document." Sarah shook her head. "We need to wait for the others. For Ben's mother." Wilson placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Child, there's no time. Holt will return with marshals, as he promised. Everyone must be gone from here by then." He nodded toward the journal. "And this evidence must reach safe hands as quickly as possible." The reality of their situation settled over Sarah like a weight. Even here in Pennsylvania, they weren't truly safe. The fugitive slave law meant that Holt could legally pursue them with the backing of federal authorities. Their journey wasn't over, perhaps wouldn't be over until they reached Canada. "What about Jacob and the others?" Marcus asked, still holding Ben's hand protectively. "If they make it across, they'll be sent on a different route," Wilson explained. "It's safer that way. If one group is captured, the others still have a chance." Ben looked up at Sarah with fearful eyes. "But my mama, you promised." Sarah knelt before the boy, her heart breaking. "I'll keep my promise, Ben. If we're separated now, we'll find each other again. In Philadelphia or New York or Canada, wherever free people can live without fear." As the morning progressed, there was no sign of Jacob's group. Whether they had been captured or had taken a different crossing, Sarah couldn't know. By midday, a covered wagon arrived at the barn, driven by a solemn-faced Quaker woman. "This will take you to Philadelphia," Wilson told them. "From there, others will guide you northward." He took Sarah's hands in his. "The journal will be delivered to the Anti-Slavery Society. What happens in that healing house will be exposed." As they prepared to depart, Sarah found herself standing at the barn door, looking back toward the river that separated slavery from freedom. Somewhere on the other side, Holt was gathering reinforcements. Somewhere on this side, Jacob and the others, including Ben's mother, might be making their way toward safety. And far behind them in Richmond, in a brick building called the Healing House, Dr. Blackwood continued his gruesome work, unaware that his carefully documented atrocities were now traveling north, evidence that would eventually bring his downfall. "Sarah!" Marcus called gently from the wagon. "It's time." With a final glance toward the river, Sarah turned and climbed into the wagon beside Marcus and Ben. Their journey continued, to Philadelphia, to New York, eventually to Canada and true freedom. But as the wagon rolled away from the border, Sarah knew that part of her would always remain connected to those left behind, to Isaiah, to Eli, to all those who had suffered and died on Dr. Blackwood's table. The journal they carried was more than evidence. It was a testament. Through it, the voices of the doctor's victims would finally be heard. Their suffering would not be forgotten. Their humanity would be affirmed. As the Pennsylvania countryside rolled past, Sarah whispered the words she had taught Ben, the words that had sustained her through darkness and would guide her toward light. All men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Words that for the first time in her life might actually apply to her. In the end, what Dr. Blackwood never understood, what all of slavery's defenders failed to grasp, was that the very people they sought to dehumanize possessed a strength and dignity that no experiment, no torture, no system of oppression could extinguish. Sarah had proven it when she stood in that healing house and said no. She had proven it again with every step of their journey north, and the journal, with its cold clinical descriptions of unspeakable cruelty, would ultimately prove not what Blackwood had intended, but the opposite, that the human spirit, regardless of the body that houses it, yearns for freedom with a power no science can deny and no doctor can cut away. The sin that blackened Virginia in 1834 would eventually be exposed to the light, and in that light, Sarah, Marcus, and countless others would finally be seen not as specimens, not as property, but as what they had always been: human beings created equal, deserving of life and liberty.